In this video, we're going to look at the top 5 most common questions that are asked in housekeeping interviews, and I'm going to help you plan fantastic answers that are going to land you the job. So let's start with one question that can be a make or break in an interview, which is simply, what hours can you work? And you want to show that your availability is very well aligned with what they need. And you have to be honest with yourself and think, do the hours that a housekeeper work actually match up with what I want? And if they don't, perhaps you really shouldn't have applied for the job in the first place. But once you've got past that barrier, the secret to success on this question is showing off as much flexibility and commitment as you can. The worst way you can answer this question, and in fact the way many people answer it, is to talk instantly about the times that they can't do. And that is the wrong way to approach this. When you're doing this, you want to show loads of flexibility, and you don't want them to think you're not actually committed to the job by ruling out a load of times that are quite important. So some really great times to mention: if you can work in the evenings, that's quite helpful. Weekends is slightly more difficult to schedule. If you're able to work around your commitments, that's much, much better than simply talking about, I can't do it because of all these things that get in the way. They want people who can actively manage their commitments. And so these things are not going to get in their way. If you're able to work school holidays, that is a really fantastic thing to mention, because again, that's a slightly more difficult time for them to staff, and you're actually going to be solving your manager's problems. If you can't work the school holidays, the trick is don't mention them at all. Don't mention anything that you can't do. You would much rather they ask about it, because the chances are they might not actually get round to asking it. So you wouldn't even reveal that, and it wouldn't count against you. If you do get asked about a time that you can't work, it's much better to talk about, I would prefer to work these hours. However, I could, in an emergency, I can try and put myself out there for you. I can work around it. You want to try and show off as much flexibility as you can. Never say a blanket no. You always want to get a but in there and try to be helpful, because that's really what they're looking for. And if you remember only one thing from this, it's be positive and have a real can-do attitude. Don't talk about what you can't do. Always talk about what you can do, even when you're saying almost that you can't do a time. You're just like, I can't generally do this. I would prefer to do this, but occasionally and in these circumstances, I could be there for you. And that's showing the commitment, which is so key to success. Now let's move on to the next question. What would you do if you saw another member of staff stealing? And this is something that a lot of employers in the hospitality sector are worried about, because you're going to have a lot of access to potentially valuable things. If you're cleaning guests' rooms, they're going to have all their property in there, and you're likely to come into contact with money. So they need to be reassured that there is someone that they can trust. And rather than accusing you of something, they ask about, what would you do if someone else was doing this? And the first thing you're going to be absolutely brutally clear about is that stealing is not acceptable. And you want to be really forceful in that you do not tolerate that, and you will not stand for it, and it is morally wrong. Make that point very, very strongly, because that's one thing they're looking for. They also would ideally like someone that's going to challenge it. That if they see someone stealing, they're not going to just watch it and let it happen. You're actually going to say, no, you can't do that. That is someone else's property. You're going to challenge it. You're probably going to look for support. You're not going to let them get away with that. You don't think stealing is acceptable. And the most important thing to get across is that you're going to report it, and also definitely mention that you don't believe, in second chances, that there is a line there that once you've stolen something, you're not going to fall for the trap of them going, oh, I really don't want to lose my job, please don't tell anyone. They've crossed the line. They've stolen. And the classic line that's used is, people will say, and you can talk about this in your interview, they will say, this is the only time I've done it and I'll never do it again. But when you think about it, is it really likely that the only time they have ever stolen anything ever is that when you're looking? And also, since they've tried stealing once, you know that they're dishonest. And so the correct decision is they need to go. And so if you can get that across to your employer, they're going to be really happy, because they're not going to stand for stealing, and they do not want to employ anyone that has any sort of gray area around whether stealing from guests is okay. So be forceful on this question, and you'll be successful on it. Next one, tell me about yourself. Really simple question, often done very terribly. This is a fantastic opportunity for you to be in control of the conversation and say what you want to say in a free forum. So you start by talking about your experience. You're going to have to mention your most recent job because you can't really tell someone about yourself without actually talking about that. And take control of the narrative. Tell them about your most recent job without them asking questions, and just tell them what you want to tell them about your most recent job, and do it in a positive way. Any relevant work experience, if you're working in housekeeping, you could bring in any experience with customer service, anywhere that you've worked with people. It's all relevant because that is a key part of your job. If you've got any qualifications at all that are relevant, a really great tip is to bring them with you. If you've got the certificates, say, I've got these qualifications, here are the certificates if you want to see them, so you've got that credibility. Then you can talk about your personal attributes. So in housekeeping, it's very important to have high standards. So just literally talking about, I have very high standards for cleanliness, is a great thing to get in there because that's such a key part of your job. You can talk about being customer centric, that when you interact with customers, you're always very professional, you're always looking to help them, and that you're a team player. You work with other people, you support people, you help out wherever you can. And also take advantage of this question to talk about your motivations, because you're in charge of the narrative. They're not asking you why you applied. You're in charge. You're going to tell them why you applied for this company, why you're interested in this company, why you love housekeeping, and why that's something you really want to work in. And also, you can get in a little bit of ambition. You can talk about your future plans, that you're hoping in the next few years to develop and perhaps move into, with the right training, some supervisory roles within housekeeping, that you're ambitious and hardworking. Get that in there. You're in charge of this narrative. So show the best version of yourself in this question. So go through the 3 pillars and do it in that order. Talk about your experience, talk about you personally, and then finish with your motivations. And if you go through that, you'll have loads to say. And a lot of people just give this tiny little answer that's about 4 sentences long and just stop dead. But you're just going to have so much when you follow this simple procedure, and try it. Your answer will be amazing. Let's move on to question 4. How long does it take you to clean a room? Looks like a simple question, but actually what they're wanting to see is that you're actually thinking about it and that you've got the right standards. They don't want someone that goes, oh, it takes me about 8 minutes, because that's not really the right answer, because you've got all these things to consider. The size of the room, because a larger room is going to take longer than a smaller room. And you're going to talk about the variety of different room types. If you've got a double room, that's going to be much quicker than if you've got a double bed and 2 single beds and you've got many more people in that room. That's going to take longer. You're going to talk about the condition that the room is in initially. So some people are incredibly tidy and you'll open the door and the room is beautiful. And so there's not that much to do to get it to the standards that you require. Other people make a massive mess, and so it will take significantly longer. So there is no steadfast, simple number. The other great thing to get in here is to talk about the policy. It depends what the policy of the hotel is. So you're going to ensure that the rooms that you maintain are up to the standard that is expected. And that is going to determine largely how long it's going to take. So some fantastic things to get in. And the top tips for this question is, don't immediately give a number, because there is no simple, easy number. You're going to use this question as an opportunity to emphasize high standards. Talk about the importance of having every single room be cleaned to a very high standard. Do also mention everything on the left. So just memorize those things and just run through these as the things that you consider. And although you can't give an exact number, you want to give a kind of typical upper and lower range. So you could say, for a room in a good condition that is small and has only 1 bed in it, typically I would be able to do it in this time. For a room that is in very poor condition and is very large, it could take up to this time, and that's typical. And then also make sure that they know that you're working fast, you're working hard, and you're not wasting any time. So you're doing it as quick as you can, but you're always maintaining your very high standards. And then you'll be successful on this question, and you'll not be tripped up by the simplistic just giving a number so you don't really know what you're talking about. All right, last question. Tell me about a time you went the extra mile for your company. So in the hospitality sector, which you're going to be a part of, they want people that are really customer focused and are going to deliver the hotel or the venue's expectations. And so the way to prepare for this is, as a very basic, is to have one really great story. So there's one story that you can talk about in great detail, but then so it doesn't look like you've only ever done something once for one person one time. You want to have at least three so you can jump between stories. And if they ask you for more or another example, you've got something prepared. Ideally, your example should be outside of your job description, because this is about going the extra mile. They expect you to be good at housekeeping. They expect you to clean to a good standard. Simply doing that is not going to make you stand out. So it has to be something outside your job description. And in the hospitality sector, the obsession is always with customer service. So you want to make sure your three examples are something to do with customer service. And there's loads of possibilities. And depending on how much experience you have, you'll have lots of different levels of availability of stories. But I would suggest looking at these for some inspiration. So reuniting someone with property, perhaps you found something that was very valuable that had been discarded somewhere, and you were able to save that item and it was reunited with the person and they were really worried and upset, but they got it back and they were so happy about it. Fixing some sort of problem that a guest has is a fabulous story from Wynn Resorts about a couple that arrived there and had forgotten their medication at the other side of the country, and one of the employees there asked them about it, and they said, "Oh, I've left it in my hometown." And they said the hometown. He goes, "Oh, my brother lives there," and they managed to get it couriered across, and that rescued that person's holiday, and they were so happy with it. So anything that's like you really fixed a big problem would be an amazing example. But it could, on the other hand, be something really simple as just doing a little bit of overtime, so that you were caught up with something else, you got distracted, there was something that happened, and therefore you couldn't finish every room by the end of your shift. And so you just did the last room in your own time for 10 minutes. So it was done, because that's one of the attributes that companies would really like to employ, someone who's actually going to get the job done regardless. And that they're not going to refuse to help a guest because they're behind on their schedule. They're going to get it done and help their guest. Resolving a conflict's another good example, or where you've prevented a crime. So you've observed a theft and you've intervened would be another great example. So any of these sort of things really make you stand out. And if you do well on this question, it can clinch you the job, because this is the question where you've got an opportunity to stand out from everyone else. So if your example is amazing and better than everyone else, you're going to come across as better than everyone else, and your chance of getting the job just went through the roof. And finally, as a bonus, here's some great questions to ask at the end of your interview. If you don't have any questions at the end of the interview, you're probably not going to get the job, because it shows a lack of preparation and a lack of interest. So I would take the time to go through all of these questions, simple ones like asking about the next steps, but also getting in the idea of feedback. So even if you're not successful, you're going to get something useful to take to your next interview. And lastly, always make sure that one of the questions is based on something that came up in the interview. So it has to be dynamic. And you can use a phrase like, "I heard you mention this earlier, I'd like to ask about." And so you're asking something directly relevant to what they've been talking about. So you've got a two-way conversation and you're showing that you're actively listening to the other person. And finally, study these questions, and thank you very much for watching.